Okay, guys, welcome back to Teen Muscle Radio and episode number 23. So today we are very lucky to be joined by Cliff Wilson, and today we're really going to be providing you guys with a very in-depth resource in terms of how to set up your contest prep. Obviously, this is going to be mainly focused, solely focused on natural contest preps. And we're also going to go a little bit into sort of the younger aspect of things as well. Some of the questions will be towards a younger athlete and how things can potentially be different for them. But nevertheless, let's get into things. So if you have potentially been living under a rock for a long period of time and you don't know who Cliff is, and you haven't seen one of his Facebook posts been shared by one of your friends, then Cliff, go ahead and just give the listeners just a brief intro as to who you are and what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, thanks, AJ. I appreciate you having me on. For those that may not know who I am, my full-time profession is actually getting bodybuilders to the stage. I don't work with general population at all. I'm pretty lucky that I get to spend all of my days focused on bodybuilding competitors. And so I've been doing that about 6.5 years now, and I would say about 5 of it have been full-time. So, I've been pretty lucky to work with some really great competitors. I've had quite a few competitors turn pro, and a few competitors win natural world championships in a couple of different federations. So, I get to spend my days doing what most people would love to spend their days doing, and that's just focusing on bodybuilding.
Very, very, very jealous, and something that I aspire to do definitely in the future. And it's absolutely a pleasure to have you on, Cliff. And obviously, you yourself are a pro natural bodybuilder as well. So for the listeners, Cliff, does it with clients, but he also, practices what he preaches as well, and gets into some crazy condition. So let's get straight into things. So first of all, Cliff, I'd really like to go into, and this was actually one of the questions that I saw someone pop up on a status that you put up as well, and that's realistically prior to starting a contest prep phase, a lot of people sometimes are a bit lost as to whether they are ready as a competitor. And what I'd like to touch on this is primarily, when do we see the point of ending a muscle gaining phase, and how are you going to determine the end of that phase and then going into a contest prep? So if we start there.
Now, when you say ready, were you looking more for a first-time competitor or somebody that's competed before getting on stage, or both?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say let's go for more of the first-time competitor. So determining whether they've got enough muscle mass and how you would potentially determine that.
Gotcha. Well, I think first off, when you're a first-time competitor, knowing what division you want to start in, whether it be bikini for women, they have bikini, they have figure, women's physique, and bodybuilding.
Yep.
Obviously, bikini is just going to require fewer years of training to get ready for it because the muscle mass demands are lesser. For men's physique, they have a little bit less muscle, but a lot of those men's physique guys are still pretty muscular, so don't get confused with that. Yeah. So I would say it really needs to be broken down into 2 aspects, physical and mental, because they kind of go hand in hand a little bit, because whether or not you're physically ready to compete, because there's no restriction. You can get up there and compete whatever you want, but then you need to ask yourself mentally, what is your goal? What would you be pleased with, satisfied with? Yeah. Getting up on stage. So, then you need to say, okay, am I physically at that point, or I can meet my mental criteria? So, if you just want to get up on stage and have fun, see where you stand, and you're not concerned about where you place, then really, you can get up on stage whenever you want, maybe after a year or 2 of training. But if you want to get up there and really hold your own, and then in that case, I would say for bikini, I would usually like to see girls train consistently for 1, preferably 2 years of weight training before they really get up on a bikini stage.
Yeah.
For guys and girls that are looking to maybe do figure or bodybuilding, then I would like to see most people train for about minimum of 4 years before they really look to get up on stage. And that may seem like a long time to some people, but if you want to get up there and really hold your own, that's just what it's going to take. And I'm not even going to touch on like turning pro and stuff like that for first-time competitors.
Yeah.
Some people love. I always hear first-time competitors. Oh, I just want to go up there and turn pro. And I don't hear. I don't see people picking up a basketball for the first time, and within a year of being like, I just want to go to the NBA. That's all. You know what I mean? So I won't even address that.
No, that's a very good analogy, and I think far too many people think that they potentially get into bodybuilding primarily like just for the success, and they don't potentially have that passion for the weights room, the passion for tracking absolutely everything they eat. And that's something that Alberto really said in his podcast as well, that you have to be in love with the process for a decent period of time before you sort of condemn yourself to the length of a contest prep.
Yeah, and I would say this, for those that say, oh my gosh, 3 or 4 years of training before I get up on stage, that sounds brutal. Well, that's already a problem right there.
Yeah.
If that seems like too long, then because to compete successfully, you do have to love the process. Like you said, Alberto Nunez said that. Yeah. To compete successfully, you have to love the process. Yeah. And you're not even sure if you're going to love the result of getting up on stage. My wife she loves dieting, eating a controlled diet, training, and she did one show, and she loves the diet and training aspect, but she did one show and she's like, I don't really care for this. I'll just stick to training hard and dieting. But yeah, you have to love the process to really do well on stage.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I think that's something that everyone needs to know. That's a really good starting point in terms of how people can assess whether they're ready to go in terms of mentally, physically. That's really good. So, in terms of, I wanted to ask a question specific to you because you've worked with so many people. Is there anyone, and maybe first timers as well, or even someone that's just come to you and maybe has competed in the past, but you get their initial shots and you think, they could do well, but as soon as they start dieting down, has anyone just really shocked you and you've thought, holy crap, there's like a ton more muscle than I thought there was there? And any examples of like characteristics they maybe had, etc., so people can just get a gauge on that.
Yeah, I have the perfect person. Actually, I wrote an article about her, and it's going to be posted on bodybuilding.com.
Oh, wow.
So if people want to be on the lookout for it. But I had a client named Carrie Bolin, and she came to me. She came to me in 2012. She'd been competing already for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And she had just failed to get lean enough.
Yep.
And she had a good amount of muscle, but I remember looking at her starting pictures. She's short. She's like 5'2", 5'1", and I remember looking at her pictures and I thought to myself, if she could turn pro this year, that would be really good. That would be like our high end goal. And I was thinking maybe she could do it. And as we started dieting down, I saw dense looking muscle like I had never seen. Like, she's a female and her muscularity was more dense than almost any male I'd ever seen. Wow. And she had thinner, some people just have a naturally thinner looking skin than other people. And she had a thin look to her skin. And she not only won her pro card, but then did her pro debut and almost beat the world champion that year, came in second. And then we took a couple year off season. And then she came back, won her next pro show, and then won the world championships. And so, and I started with, I was like, maybe she'll turn pro, and then she became world champion. So I was way off on my guess there.
Mental. Yeah. That's a super cool example, and even more cool that she was a female, because I think I think a lot of females are sometimes scared, especially with the sort of the physique figure categories, as to whether they're muscular enough to compete in them. I've definitely had a few girls recently I've been coaching more females, and you know they're unsure as to whether, you know, they fit into the bikini or figure criteria, and you know, realistically it may well take that, you know, just the dietary process, you know, getting leaner to actually see what they look like underneath, and whether, you know, obviously there's drastic differences between the conditioning in figure and bikini, etc. So but that's a really cool story, and yeah, thanks for sharing that one.
Well, and you know, one thing I always say to, especially like first-time competitors, if they're not sure where they fit, first-time competitors are the most nervous competitors because they don't know how they're going to place. You know, they don't know how they're going to do. They're worried they're going to be embarrassed. But one thing I always tell first-time competitors is, your first show, you literally have the least pressure on you that you will ever have in your entire career. It's your first show. Nobody expects you to win. Nobody even expects you to do well. Mm-hmm. And so you could go out there, place poorly, and everybody's just going to say, well, it's your first show. But then your next show, you have to improve upon it. So I really think that learning to just be okay with whatever happens at your first show is good. And then that teaches you so much about what you need to improve upon and where you need to go.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So the next stage of questions I'd really like to touch on would be basically the initial setup of the contest prep phase. And when it comes to, you know, getting clients on board with yourself, what's the first process that they have to go through? Are they sending you images? Are they sending you data on or sort of where their macros are at currently? And is there anything that you'd say you look for, particularly when a client's coming to you and you think, okay, we're in a good spot to sort of, you know, get going with things soon? And how do you sort of gauge those things with clients?
This is actually a big part of what I do, is finding people that are ready. Because most people are not ready. For me as a coach, for me to be successful as a coach and me help my clients be successful, is making sure I'm taking people that are prepared to do this. And I'm lucky. I actually have someone that helps me now go through my client applications. His name's Dan Feeney. He's been an absolute lifesaver because I couldn't go through everybody because I'm pretty detailed about the process, and now Dan helps me be detailed. But I get all the information about what they're eating, if they've done previous shows before, what did they look like, you know, all the stats: body weight, food intake, training, cardio. I want to see current pictures, past pictures, and I get all that information. But the biggest thing that I see is that people don't give themselves enough time. A lot of times people say, you know, I want to, you know, start with you right now, and I want to be ready for the show in 15 weeks. And I would say, if I had to guess a percentage, I should go through my applications and actually get the true percentage, but I would say only 5 to 10% of people are actually ready to be able to be ready for the show they want to do.
Wow.
And so, you know, one of the reasons I've had someone have Dan helping me, and it's because it's because you know, they maybe haven't given themselves enough time to grow since their last show, and their food's still really low, or they just have too much fat to lose. And so, you know, one thing I do a lot of times is, I mean, it's going, you know, me and Dan will just go through the applications, and it's pretty much telling 90% of the people, you know, you need to pick a different show, And a lot of times, but I won't take somebody on right away. I'll tell them, you need to be aiming for this show. And the biggest part is convincing people to do that later show, because once they get their hearts set on a show, they don't want to change it. But, you know, there are, well, at least, you know, here in the U.S., but there are a lot of shows every year that you can do. And you know, I always put it this way. You know, a lot of bodybuilders consider themselves very dedicated in doing whatever it takes to win. But you know, sometimes what it takes to win is exercising patience, and, you know, showing that patience to pick a later show, do a longer diet. That's what it takes, and a lot of people are just not willing to do that.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I think it's not almost like people are misguided. Maybe it's because there's there's still a lot of coaching practices that maybe aren't quite up to the standard, at least that you'd expect from a client, and maybe people that have just gone down the wrong route, whether it's drastic restriction, coming out of a diet and then expecting to go back and compete again really consistently, or the other end of the scale is that they've been led down the direction of gaining far too fast, and you get initial pictures and you're like, you've got 60 to 70 pounds of legitimate weight loss to get into shape, and that's just not feasible for the show date. What do you see more often than not? Like, would you say you get more competitors that are too far gone in a gaining phase, or too many competitors that have a show date that's too soon? What's the sort of the difference between those two?
It's kind of a combination of the two, because a lot of people think they're going to be heavier on show day than what they are. Guys are really bad with this as compared to girls. Most guys think, oh, I'm going to be 185 pounds on show day, and I have to tell them, no, you're probably going to be like 165 pounds on show day. Because a lot of times they'll come to me and they'll say, they'll be 215 pounds. Mm-hmm. So they think, I know a lot of your listeners are in the UK, but so they'll have to do the math into kilograms.
We do work in pounds quite frequently, actually, so it should be all right.
Okay. So they'll say they're 215 pounds. Oh, I only need to lose 30 pounds. I should be able to be ready in 25 weeks. Well, when I look at their pictures and I say, well, no, you're going to be more probably like 165, 170 pounds. Well, that just added a lot of extra diet time. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it first starts with having an accurate estimated, because nobody ever knows exactly what they're going to weigh on show day, but an accurate estimated show weight, and then doing the calculation to make sure you have adequate time to pull off that much weight, and it kind of feeds into one. So be realistic. I tell most guys, if you've never really hit your true stage conditioning, then take what you think you're going to weigh on show day, and you probably need to subtract about 10 to 15 pounds from that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, no, definitely. So would you say, is that your sort of method of working out how long they need for a contest diet? It's just sort of gauging how many pounds they need to lose, and then basically looking at how many weeks and adding a few onto the end of that? Is that how you'd sort of gauge things in terms of setting up the longevity of the prep?
Yeah. The very first step will be getting an accurate assessment of, and that's why I ask for a lot of. It's easier if you've done a show before. For somebody that's never dieted down, I can look at a lot of times people are going to come to me as a coach because they didn't hit their conditioning at the last show. Sure. But if I can see their last show pictures, it gives me an idea of how close they were. I can say, oh, they were 7 pounds off, they were 5 pounds off. So I get all that information, and Dan helps me get all that information. And we take a look and we say, okay, this person was pretty close the last time. They need to lose 5 pounds more. That lets me know how much they're going to need to pull off from their current condition. Sure. And then you sort of do, and then you sort of do the math. Then you need to take into consideration. This is where the nuance comes in of coaching. You need to see how much they're currently eating. Yep. Somebody that's eating more currently will be able to lose more per week than somebody that's eating less.
Makes sense.
Just because there's more to cut.
Yeah.
So, so I'll say, we can keep a higher rate of loss with this person. So I may give two different people two different recommendations. Person A may have 20 pounds to lose as well as person B. Mm-hmm. But if person A is eating quite a bit more, I will give them a shorter prep time than this person. Yeah. And so, that's why people always ask me, I get a lot of people that ask me, they'll say, what do you charge for prep? And I say, well, I need to get some information from you, because I'm not gonna prep person B for a 20-week prep if I know that their end result is not gonna be what they want.
Yeah, of course.
And so, I always got to get all the information, find out what they need, and then we can work it from there, because I'm not going to prep somebody if I know the end result is not going to be satisfactory for me or them.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And you wouldn't want to, you wouldn't want to put anyone under false hope, etc. When you get them on board and you're like, you're going to be ready, here's the money, transfer it. That's part of the integrity of being a coach, is you've got to be honest. Like, you've got to give them an honest representation of where you're going to be and how you can get there.
Yeah. Oh, and you're a coach yourself, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are coaches, and I would say, as a coach, promising things you can't deliver on is one of the worst things you can do. And I know some coaches will do it because they want the money. They'll say, oh, I can get you to the stage in 15 weeks, or I can help you turn pro, and it's so they can get that short term. They want the money coming in and get that client. But the problem is, when that doesn't happen at the end of the prep, that person's not going to be happy, and that's not going to look good for you, and they're not going to tell other people about your services. So, I mean, the best thing you can do is just be honest with people. You're going to lose some people, but be honest with them. Be honest with them, and then get good results for the people that'll trust you.
Yeah, agreed, for sure. Cool, wicked. So next, I'd really like to touch on basically the dietary side of things when it comes to contest prep setup. So first of all, if we could go over what approach you are generally using with your clients. And what I mean by that is, are you sending your clients initial meal plans, or are you dictating macros, or would you call it a macro meal plan? And if you could also just roll through why you've used these approaches, and also any sort of, over the last few years, if you've changed approach and why also.
Yeah. I do adjust my clients' macros, and I also give recommendations for timing of those macros.
Makes sense.
Because I don't want, if I give somebody 250 carbs, I don't want them eating those 250 carbs in one single meal. You know what I mean? Yeah. There are specific times where you can. For example, pre-training carbs, when energy is at a higher premium during prep, that's gonna help with training. So, I will give specific recommendations. I don't give specific food recommendations for a couple different reasons. One, I think it's crucially important that the client likes what they're eating.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people say, well, can you give me a meal plan? And I say, well, no, because I don't know what foods you like. In case, I'll tell them, you make a meal plan with the foods you like, and I'll take a look at it. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to influence their food choices. There's not going to be good foods and bad foods. Some foods are more nutritious than others. But then second of all, I want to see variety in their diet. Mm-hmm. And so, I even if they lay out their own meal plan, I may tell them, you're eating the same exact thing every day, or maybe there's just not enough variety in that. Different vegetables, different foods are going to bring different nutrients. Yeah. And so I kind of want to see a variety in that manner. So I give timing recommendations. I lay out their macros for the day, and then they set the meal plan from there, and we kind of go from there. But I may ask specific questions along the way, like how many vegetables are you eating, because even some grown adults, they will fight against eating their vegetables on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you had any situations where you've had clients sort of question the whole flexible dieting approach and maybe, I guess, be a little bit against it? And how would you battle that? Would you have an argument for flexible dieting, or would you say, I'm still giving you your macros, you can eat however you choose, and you just let the argument go away? How would you deal with that at all?
When I first started coaching, it was really difficult to get people to trust, like, not giving them a meal plan, because there weren't a lot of people doing it, around 2010, 2011. Now it's a lot more common. And then also, I was newer as a coach, so I didn't really have a proven track record. So it was very hard to get them to trust it. And, it really took time. But now I don't have it as much, because there are a lot more people that do it, as well as I have clients that have had great success while following, choosing their own foods. So, that proves as a track record. But overall, I think even now for younger coaches, newer coaches that don't have the proven track record, there are still a lot of people that have been successful that you can point to in the bodybuilding arena and say, this person doesn't follow a meal plan and they've been really successful. But
Yeah.
but overall, I've always found that one good thing I can do is say, here's your macros, here's your recommended timing. Why don't you lay out a meal plan and I'll take a look at it? Because that way I'm not just saying you're on your own. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it and making sure everything is good. But and then also for some people, it's an issue of they don't want to think. They don't want to. They don't want to think to put macros together. They just want to be given their meal plan and go off, not have to think about it. They just make it.
Yeah.
But that, to me, that's a problem. Yeah. And to me, another thing I tell people, if that's the case, they say I don't want to think about what I'm eating. I just want to eat it and go. But another thing I'm really big on is I want somebody that's actively engaged. I don't want you to not think. I don't want you turning your brain off during your prep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm engaged in the process.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the difficulty is obviously there's people out there arguing both sides. So you've got a lot of people that will put up I saw one post last night. Then probably the reason that I asked this question is because it was just a very brash post on Facebook about shunning flexible dieting and you cannot fit this, you can't possibly get into condition fitting this. And I think it's just two ends of the scale of people arguing, and it is a bit of a difficulty when a client says that, but I think your way of dealing with it is very good. You still having that I guess role in controlling the foods they're eating by looking at what they have sort of fitted into their macros. And there comes a point where I think to an extent the whole thinking process of food, and sometimes I think I see a slight bit more of food focus with individuals that are avidly thinking about what they can potentially fit into their numbers for the day. Whereas, like closer, like when you get really, really close and, you are legitimately really hungry, it could be probably beneficial to have your structure very well embedded into your day, so you're not thinking, you get home and you're thinking about how much ice cream you can have or weigh out this, and you end up very food focused. And I've been a suspect of that, I think, towards the end of one of my contest preps.
Well, and that's what I tell people too, is I like them to kind of create their own meal plan, because I don't want them just winging it through the day. What am I going to eat for my last meal? I especially in prep, I would like you to know what you're already going to eat for your last meal. And like you said, okay, I'll use myself for an example, because obviously I can speak from experience. My last prep, I got down to about 100 carbs a day for quite a long time at the end of my prep. I'm not going to be having ice cream on 100 carbs a day, because I will use all of my carbs so fast. And so, I mean, a lot of my carbs came from vegetables. Yeah, I had my option of vegetables. But so I think there's also that misconception of, what is flexible dieting, because they think it is, the more food you have in your diet, the more room you have for, goodies like ice cream and, maybe a candy bar or something like that. Yeah. But when you're down to 100 carbs a day, or maybe even 150 carbs a day, there's not a whole lot of ice cream going on. There's not a whole lot of candy getting put in your diet, because you need the volume, the food volume of vegetables and more starchy type carbs, complex carbohydrates, as well as the nutrition. You can't waste, because I mean, while low fat ice cream tastes good, you could waste half of your day's carbs and get 0 vitamins and minerals from that. So you need to use your macronutrients wisely, and show discretion in how you use them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's nailed the approach side of things, and definitely answers a few questions as to what people should be doing as they diet down, and even from the start, you know, embedding that structure, just so you know that by the end you're not going to be suddenly in a shock as to the variety, well, not the variety, but those treats, you know, they do disappear quite fast. So if anything, it's probably good to have some solid structure from the start, so it's not so much of a shock. So when it comes to the initial macros that you'd be setting people on, and I've heard you on podcasts before, and sometimes heard some slightly different things as to what you do when it comes to gaining phase macros or off-season macros, especially with protein intake, some slightly different views, only slightly, but still a little bit different. So when it comes to initially setting up the macros, obviously to get the client into a deficit, is there anything initially that would drastically change? And let's say this individual's, you know, already on, you know, wise macro ratios when it comes to carb, fat, protein. There's nothing crazy bad going on. How would the initial numbers look, and is there anything that you would do differently that would just per client maybe as well?
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you know, for those that aren't familiar, in the off season, I do tend to keep protein intake really high compared to what most people would do. Yeah. Some of that is also, you know, without going too in depth, some of that's based on the research showing that, you know, you can add protein without gaining much fat. So, you know, as well as anecdotally, I've just seen the people that take in higher amounts of protein for longer periods of time tend to have better results. And so that's something I've done for quite a few years now. So whereas a lot of people, when they begin a contest prep phase, a lot of times they will have protein set here, and then they'll raise it up a little bit while they reduce from carbohydrates and fats. But, you know, so they may start here and raise it up to here. The biggest difference is I'm not raising it up because I'm already here. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I'm already high in the off season. So I may actually begin contest prep by keeping it the same, or if I've gone really high in the off season, I may reduce protein a little bit, because I you know, as you diet down for a show, obviously you need protein as substrate to repair muscle tissue, but also you need carbohydrates to continue to train hard. You know, one of the biggest problems that people see towards the end of a prep is their just performance takes a huge dip. So as much as you can mitigate that effect by, you know, keeping carbohydrates high and keeping training intensity high and strength high. So I may start by lowering protein a little bit to this will put me where a lot of people raise it up to. And then I really start kind of chopping away from the carbohydrates and the fats, because you're going to need to do that. I would say my fat intake over the course of an entire prep stays a little bit higher than what I see most other people doing.
Okay. Is there any sort of rationale behind that? What would you say is the main reasoning behind the fat intake being slightly high?
And I guess I would say not a whole lot, but I see some coaches, some people will get down to 25 to 30 grams of carbohydrates, or I'm sorry, fats. For maybe female clients, and maybe in the range of 30 to 40 for males.
Sure, okay, yep.
And myself, I try, if possible, not to go below 40 grams for women, maybe down to 35 if I really need to push it.
Yep.
And then I try for men not to go much below 50. Yeah. You know, and I may go a little bit lower if I really need to push it again. Yeah. But the reason for that, just a few different reasons. You know, anecdotally, I just see people feeling much better during their prep. They don't feel as drained, they don't feel as sluggish, and they tend to perform better in the gym. And then I've been fortunate enough to work with so many people over the years, and I have some of them that let me, will take hormone panels as they go throughout their prep. And I notice, while at the end of prep, there is, for those that aren't familiar, if you're a natural competitor, hormone levels like testosterone are going to tank at the end of prep. Cortisol is going to go way up. But I have seen that by keeping fat just a little bit higher, I can keep that drop, you know, that tank at the end of it. I can keep it from happening for a little bit longer. So it doesn't happen quite. It doesn't seem from the hormone panels I've seen to drop quite as quickly. It still ends up in about the same spot, but it doesn't drop quite as soon.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. I was assuming that the fat intake being slightly higher would probably be from a hormonal point of view. And so in that perspective, would you, I guess, would you favour creating more of a deficit via activity as a result of keeping fat intake slightly higher than most coaches, or would you say that at the end of the prep, if you compared, I guess, some other people's macros to yours, would you say that carbohydrates tend to fall slightly lower, and maybe why as well?
I definitely try to not use cardio as much as possible, but obviously, especially for hard, people that have a hard time losing fat and women, at a certain point you need to bring the cardio up significantly. But in the beginning
Yeah.
stages, I try to take away mostly from carbohydrates. Um,
Okay.
I'll leave it as high as possible, but I mean, and we're not talking about a great amount of calories. The difference between 30 grams of fat versus 40 grams of fat. So that's not a lot of calories right there. So you're not going
No.
to affect your overall view of things. And I think one of the big reasons why it may just help people feel a little bit better is that there are essential fats are essential. And overall, I try to take the view with contest prep in general, where I try to lessen the severity of the measures that I take and try to avoid taking drastic measures, because
Yeah.
the sooner you take drastic measures, or what your body perceives as drastic measures, the more drastic changes your body will take to create homeostasis. So
Yeah.
keep that in mind. The second people think, because those people that have that mindset of 15 weeks out, time to go, they start slashing food and upping their cardio. Well, that just ensures the sooner they're going to start feeling like crap. So
Yeah.
so that from that aspect, but overall, cardio. You're getting back to your question about cardio and activity. Cardio
Yeah.
is
Sure.
pretty much my. I try to keep cardio as my last resort. Um,
Hmm.
you, a lot of people would prefer to do some extra activity and eat more, but
Yeah.
I am of the mindset that you're not going to get as your results won't be the same. And one of the biggest reasons
Yeah.
for that is cardio requires recovery. Well, not nearly as much as weight training, but performing hit cardio is still going to require some recovery. It's going to dip into
Yeah.
your recovery ability. So it takes recovery to uh, perform a 10-minute hit session. That eats up some of your recovery. It requires nothing it requires no recovery ability to cut 20 grams of carbohydrates. Um,
Yeah.
so that's why it's much easier to do that, and then that saves more of your recovery ability for your weight training. So it's kind of a cycle that feeds
Makes
into
sense.
it. Instead of performing cardio, I can cut food, and I can still train a little bit harder because I'm not trying to recover from my cardio.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess whilst we're on the topic of cardio as well and energy expenditure, I've seen you recently as post. Actually, no, I'm not sure whether it was in one of your posts, but it may well have been. It was. Are you now using with any clients? Are you using activity trackers? And are you giving guidelines to clients as to how many steps they should be looking to hit per day? And has there been sort of any changes as to the rise of activity trackers with your coaching, and obviously all relative to the control of energy expenditure?
Um, yeah, maybe you did see. I actually did have a client that was using an activity tracker,
Tracking
and she was keeping
steps.
me
Yeah.
posted on it. Yeah. For the most part, though, I don't. Well, I'll put it this way: I never use activity trackers. The biggest reason is that I kind of feel like our daily life is our daily life. We just go through your day as normal, and I don't want people altering their daily life, as many steps as they need to take that day, that's what they'll take. And then we can alter uh, diet, training, cardio as needed to work around that. Because, some people may say it's better to take more steps or less steps, but, if it's part of your job and it's just part of what you do, I don't want this sport is already all consuming as it is.
Yeah.
And so I would rather have people going about their daily life and not really worrying about every step they take. I think the mental stress of having to worry about am I taking enough steps would probably just start to become more of a hassle than it's worth.
Yeah, no, I do actually agree with on that front. I think, quite a lot of the time it can take away from the focus of just ticking the boxes when it comes to contest prep. So, have I done my cardio? Have I done my training? Have I tracked my nutrition? Have I slept well? Because you don't really want to be at 9 p.m. looking at the step tracker thinking, shit, I've got 1,000 more steps to do. Let's go out for a walk. And, that again, may well impact recovery and may well increase stress. And obviously we know how integral it is for a client to be as low stress as possible when it comes to contest prepping. So if anything, I think quite frequently a activity tracker can actually be more of a stress than it is a tool for success when it comes to contest prep.
You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. And that is the biggest thing. I think, lack of stress is one of the biggest overlooked factors during a contest prep. Mm-hmm. The people that are most relaxed and just going with the flow, they always get better results because, they're not stressing. Yeah, they're not stressing about every little thing. And then I feel like if you add in this device that is constantly like, I don't know, I haven't hit my numbers for today, that's just going to stress people out. I don't want them thinking about that. And like you said, if you get to the end of the night and you're beat, I don't want people thinking, I was 500 steps short. Should I go out and get a walk? No, I'd rather you just go to bed, get some sleep, and start the next day anew. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the same time there is some benefit to being on top of at least determining where your average activity is at. But you could do that by sort of roughly being aware of, one day of activity. I think the only thing that I'd see as a potential benefit is the fact that we do get inherently lazy as contest prep wears on, so that when you are, I guess at the start phases, you may have a client that's very, very active, doing lots and lots in every day, and then they just get lazier and lazier, the NEAT drops off, and you could be looking at a potential 300, 400 calories of NEAT just lost out the window. So I think that would maybe be the only reason to argue using one, but nevertheless you could just prescribe a client to not get lazy.
Yeah, or if that case, then you would just adjust the diet or the cardio accordingly. Yeah. I kind of account for the fact that people are going to become a little bit lazier, so I'll even use something like LISS cardio, because LISS cardio, low intensity steady state, that's not going to eat up a lot of recovery ability, and I can and sometimes I'll use it as a little bit of and this goes back into if anybody that's followed me knows that I am also really big on just kind of the holistic approach to contest prep, making sure the mental aspect is in tune with the physical aspect. Because we can quantify a lot of things with macros and training and volume and sets and reps, but there are certain aspects such as stress and everyday life. Like I'll even tell some clients if I know they're a particularly stressed out person, or if they've been, if they're the type that get hyper focused, and we all have a tendency to neglect certain areas of our life during contest prep because it's so consuming. So I may adjust for that, and I'll even say, all right, we're going to add in a 30-minute walk this week, and then I want you to go for a walk with your wife. You know what I mean? Like, so that way they're spending time with their family. They're spending time with their family, which is going to de-stress them a little bit, as well as making up for some of that NEAT that happened.
Yeah, makes sense. I think that's a very good approach. So yeah, I think the next thing I wanted to ask, and again, I think this was on the comments section, which is good. So when it comes to supplementation for a contest prep, just cover the and this is going to sound like a sales plug, but just cover the core supplements that you would have as a sort of this. We're starting contest prep. This is what I want you taking, and this is why.
When it comes to supplements, I use a lot of supplements, and I believe in a lot of supplements, but
yeah, sure.
My approach is that it's such a small piece of the puzzle, compared to diet and training. So when I give recommendations for supplements, I keep a hierarchy of most to what is least important, and then I don't require anything, but I make the recommendations, and then clients I place an order, and then they can buy whatever they can afford, because supplements can get really expensive really quickly.
Sure.
So I do like a lot of my clients to have a whey protein shake after their training. So that would be like number one there.
Is that isolate or just a standard whey?
Isolate. I like isolate, and then also I like to even have them have a mix of a whey casein blend to have. They don't have to take it at any point, but I think that's a good thing for anybody to have, because there are times you don't feel like cooking. There are times where you don't have time to cook, and that's when bad decisions are made. So a whey casein mix that obviously the whey has a better amino acid profile than the casein, but the casein has a slower digestion rate, so it works better as a meal replacement than whey alone. So I like the combination. So I'll recommend those two, and then even things like fish oil. I like branched chain amino acids, even though it's not as popular as of late. I do think there are benefit to having them during training. So I'll have branched chain amino acids during training, creatine, obviously, and I kind of list the hierarchy of these, proven supplements. And then I'll even get down into supplements like, then for contest prep, I'll recommend like HMB to preserve muscle. And then I'll even have like more specialty supplements towards the bottom, where, because some people have more money than other people. Some people can throw as much money as they want towards supplements. So I'll even say like these supplements may be beneficial. And so, if you want to put money towards them, go for it. That's your call. But they're towards the bottom. So, I kind of ladder it like that.
That makes sense. When it comes to HMB, I have actually got a question on HMB. How are you dosing HMB, and is there any sort of time that you would optimally take HMB?
I usually like to take 2 divided doses, 1.5 grams pre-training, 1.5 grams post-training. Now, there hasn't really been a lot of research on it, but during my own contest prep, now, once again, I am sponsored by Core, so I have access to more supplements than most people. I was actually doing 1.5 grams pre-training, 1.5 grams post-training, and then 1.5 grams before bed. And so it was one of those things where I was just taking a little extra just for the possible benefit. I'm not even positive if that will provide benefit, but the extra 1.5 grams before bed was. It was worth the chance for me, so I took it.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's the HMB is something that I haven't actually used yet in the contest prep. But if it gives me 1% potential more muscle retention, I'm going to do it. So absolutely. One other question I had as well when it came to supplementation is, have you ever, when it comes to obviously there is, I believe, some slight research behind yohimbine and using that in a fasted state. Have you had any sort of experience with that, either using it with clients or yourself?
I've used it before, and I've recommended it for clients. I do see benefits for some people when I combine it with caffeine. and
Okay.
I will use it in a more of a fasted state, and but then I get into issues where I don't usually like to do completely fasted cardio, so then it might uh,
Yeah.
blunt some of the benefits of the Yohimbe. One of the issues I've run into with Yohimbe is that it increases stress levels for a lot of people, and I
Definitely does.
even yeah, and so even high doses can induce panic attacks in some people. So
Wow. Wow.
I sort of gauge what type of person I'm recommending it to. If I have somebody that's
Yeah.
really if I have somebody that's normally just a pretty stressed out person, there's no way in hell I'm
Right.
recommending Yohimbe. And even for myself, I'm a very low stressed person. So it doesn't bother me at all to take it.
Hmm.
But I've even noticed when I take it, I tend to get run down a little bit more quickly
Okay.
from I think just too many stimulants, and so
Okay. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
when using Yohimbe, I would say I think you need to be very aware of it. Like if you take it, you need to really monitor how it makes you feel. Notice if you feel an increase in agitation. Do you feel more run down over the
Ah.
coming 3-4 days? And then
Yeah.
some people don't have any of the negative side effects. I've noticed some people have stronger negative
Okay.
side effects. So if you try it, I think there's some benefit to it, but you need to be really aware of what negative effects it may be having on you, and whether or not it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So you need to be quite self-aware when taking your him being.
Yeah, and,
um,
and that goes back to what I said. I don't want clients taking what I recommend and just shutting their brain off. Everything they do,
yeah. Right.
I want them thinking about it and then be able to give me feedback on it.
Yeah. Makes sense for sure. Cool. Wicked. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover from a dietary setup point of view. Um, if we could move on to basically training setup for a contest prep phase. So when it comes to programming someone's training, now let's consider someone who is someone like yourself who's been training in a manner that's acceptable and has applied basic principles and knows exactly what they're doing with their off-season training, but just wants to get into a contest prep phase. Is there anything initially that does change, and why would you change it as a result of going into a contest prep phase?
With some of my training, and with some of my training approaches, I would say I go against the grain a little bit.
Yeah,
Well,
I've
and
seen sometimes.
yeah, yeah. I always tell people, I have some bro tendencies, if you will, but when it comes to contest prep, I don't change the approach really, because I'm a firm
Yeah,
believer that the same training methods that will maximize your growth in the off season are the same ones that will maintain your muscle mass in
retention. Yeah.
contest prep. And so, I don't really change anything. And there is some research to show that a reduced training volume will help
Yeah.
preserve muscle, but in
Okay.
in my experience, that sort of takes care of itself, because if you keep a
Uses
similar
multiplies.
number yeah, yeah. If you keep a similar number of sets and reps, you're going to lose strength over the course of prep, and so that reduced training volume sort of takes care of itself as you go. And I
Yeah.
find that people just settle into what they are capable of. And obviously, you need to keep monitoring as you go. You need to keep monitoring how am I feeling, how am I performing, and you always adjust as you go. But overall,
Yeah.
there's going to be similar recommendations for volumes and reps, because it's all gonna be the same principles. Now, with that, I will say at the beginning of prep, I don't change a thing, but at the tail end of prep, I will maybe shy away from heavier loads with lower rep ranges. Um,
Makes sense. Yeah.
uh, for two reasons, or a couple reasons. One, um, the risk of injury just becomes a little too great in maybe the final 4 to 7 weeks, depending on who I'm dealing with. I think anybody that has been
Yeah,
in
for sure.
true con, I think anybody that's been in true contest shape knows how frail you feel at the very end, and
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
getting in there and performing a set of 3 or 4 reps on a squat or a deadlift feels like you might break. Um, And then also those lower reps really dig into your recovery ability quite a bit more than a higher rep set for a lower volume payoff. I can get a lot more training volume with a set of 10 or 12 than I can with a set of 2 or 3, and that's going to eat into my recovery ability a lot more. And then the last reason is the mental aspect of it. I think for a competitor that is absolutely depleted in dieting at the very end of a prep, it can be defeating to try to do a 2 or 3 rep max and see how much strength they've lost compared to what they were at their max, and so it becomes mentally defeating. And I'm not going to ask them to do that,
Yeah. No, I think from that standpoint, in terms of the heavier work, I definitely agree. I think that something that I found with myself for sure is that when you do lose a lot of body fat, things like squats, bench, and heavy low rep ranges become very, very different. Obviously, that's due to leverages changing massively, and if you're a low bar squatter, you've no longer got half the body fat on your upper back to rest the bar on. It's not comfy in the hole. You've got lots of different things going on. So I think if you're looking at depositing the credits in the account that you need to get the work done and keep the volume there, then definitely looking at reducing the load and keeping the volume roughly the same, but not doing those really disgusting heavy sets is probably going to be optimal towards the end. And I think also from the heavy set standpoint, I think most people will just end up taking all day to complete like 5 sets of 4, because you don't want to get back under the bar after that first set, and I'm sure that you've potentially gone through that before.
Oh yeah. I mean, anybody that when they're completely dieted down, you know that feeling where also you just think, damn, this is gonna be so heavy right now, and it's no problem in the off season, and I was even telling somebody this in the gym the other day, because I'm several months post show right now, and at a certain point it kind of clicks for you and you forget. I forgot what it was like to just be naturally aggressive in the gym. You're like, throw another plate on there. I'll do this. Whereas in the final stages of contest prep, you're like, damn, I don't know about this. So it's a lot easier mentally and physically to even just say a set of 15, and you're going to get a lot more volume for less mental and physical taxing than you would for a set. Now I'll still recommend people do sets of 6. Something like that, because you're still you're still getting a variety of rep ranges, which will induce growth through different mechanistic pathways, as opposed to high reps and low reps. So you're still getting that variety, but I'm just not asking people to do triples or doubles or anything like that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think I've heard you in a podcast before that you talked about, when you're coming out of a contest prep, when you no longer have to really force yourself to be motivated for your sessions, i.e. listening to the most horrific dubstep mix and
yes.
Getting yourself amped under the bar. Like when all hope is lost. I remember when I had to try and get myself motivated for sessions, but I just ended up giving up, and I think I started listening to like some podcasts in my sessions, because I just literally nothing would motivate me to get under the bar. But it's very important that people realize that that is probably a normal process of going through. And like we said right at the start, if you don't have that passion for the weight room, you wouldn't even turn up for that session. You'd have quit by that point, which is mad.
Well, and that's another thing too. We going back to the very beginning. You asked what I looked for when people apply to work with me, and I'm fortunate. I'm more fortunate than most coaches, and I don't want coaches to take this the wrong way. But I'm fortunate that I get so many people applying with me now that I can really pick out the ones that I want to work with.
Yeah.
But if you're a coach that still isn't full with clients, just take anybody. You know what I mean? Like, we work with those people. But when I see it in their application, where they're in their off season, and they struggle with getting themselves to go to the gym, or struggle to hit their macros or stay on plan, and then they tell me they want to do a show. I see that as a big problem, because this is the easiest it will be. When you're in your off season and you're eating, it is not going to get any easier than this right now. And if you can't do it now, then I really worry what it's going to be like, when things get down to the nitty gritty in the last 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, and there's such a high potential that they won't even get there, and that's so cool for you to be able to have that control over who you pick, because the worst thing is coaching someone, putting all that effort in, and then you not getting the satisfaction of them ending the process and stepping up on stage. So I'm sure you're probably very much like me. I've had few competitors step on stage, but when I have, I felt so much a part of the process that when I'm sitting in the audience watching them, I'm nervous for them. I've been all the whole way, and I'm sure you feel exactly the same. So it's very special.
Oh, don't even get me started on that. One of my goals over the last few years is I've been better at this, is to relax a little bit when dealing with my competitors. I've had some clients. The very worst is when your client gets a poor placing that they didn't deserve. That is the absolute worst. I've had a couple of times where I've had clients that should have placed highly or won, but then get a poor placing, and I'm losing my mind. I'm like, oh, what are we gonna do? And meanwhile they're like, it's okay, Cliff, calm down. They're telling me to calm down, and I wasn't even the one stepping on stage. But and that's the thing is, and when I have people that apply with me that are struggling with motivation to hit their training, it's not to say that they won't make it. Maybe they need some extra attention, whatever it may be.
Sure,
and
sure.
At this point in my coaching career, I have a lot of clients, and so even I view it as an aspect of I may not even be able to give that extra attention that they require. So in those cases, I keep a handful of coaches that are very good at what they do, and they're educated, and so I'll even put them in contact with these people who will be able to give them that extra attention, and maybe be able to talk through some of the psychological roadblocks that they're having to get to that point where they enjoy the process more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very cool, and I think a lot of people, when they get to the point where they've reached the capacity with their coaching. I know Lane talked about it as well, that he has lots of coaches that he will just push clients onto, and that's very cool that you've got to see that position, and rightly so, because you are doing great things. So when it comes to I think I want to talk on quickly, just cover whether you actually structure deloads in your training at all, and why you would potentially structure deloads. Also, are they auto-regulated by the client, or will you whack them in and tell the client that they must deload on this week?
With deloads, I take a variety of approaches. When it comes to newer competitors, when I say newer, maybe in the first 4 or 5 years of training, and that may not seem really new to some people, but there's a big difference in how in tune you are with your body when you're 4 years into training versus say 8. And so for newer and intermediate competitors, I will tell them when to deload. I may ask them for some feedback, but I'll say, we're going to deload here, and we structured him. But when I have more advanced competitors, 6+ years of training, 7+ years, I don't schedule the deloads. I ask them for feedback on how they're feeling, and I sort of let them tell me when they feel they need it, because I don't, I feel like it's a little silly to have regularly scheduled deloads for advanced competitors, because sometimes I've seen it where you're just feeling good. You hit that nice stride, whatever it may be. Maybe all in your life is good. You're sleeping a lot at night, and it's just week after week of I'm hitting PRs, I'm training intensely, and I don't want to mess that up with a deload. You know what I mean? Let's just keep it rolling.
Yep.
And then when you feel like you are you're sluggish, maybe you're not feeling as good in the gym, and then we'll deload. And then when I say deload, I will use traditional deload weeks where I back off of the volume. Oh, you there?
Got you, got you, got you. Yeah,
Okay.
just continue from there. It's absolutely fine. It's very perfect because we will be splitting this into two, so this
Okay.
we'll probably be absolutely fine. I think also
Okay.
there's a slight merge. I think there's a slight merge in voices, but don't worry about that because it won't. The how the recording works, it won't be like that at all when we spit it out. So I've
Okay.
somehow got you back, which is good.
Okay.
So I
Cool.
think we got to deloading, and you were just about to tell me how you deload. So if you could just roll in straight into that. Sorry, Cliff.
Okay, no problem. So when it comes to the deloads, I do sometimes use more traditional deloads where I will reduce training volume and intensity for an
Okay.
entire week
Yep.
and let people get into the gym and just have lighter workout and training sessions. But
Yeah.
my preferred way of doing it is to just give people time off from the gym
Hmm.
uh, for a few different reasons. There is some research to show that getting away from the stimulus of training can resensitize you to the stimulus of training. So when you come back,
Okay.
it will have a greater effect. So when I say deload, I'll usually sometimes do 3 days off for people, but every
Okay.
so often I'll even go 5 to 7 days off from the gym. During that amount of time, you're not going to lose much muscle tissue. And if you
No.
do lose any muscle tissue, it will be back within a matter of days. So it's nothing of
Yeah.
concern. And so, having, full days off does a lot of extra. I'd rather have people use that time where they're not in the gym. They can get some extra sleep. They can get some extra house that they've been putting off, and so it's a mental and physical break where they can get away from the gym, get out of that mode for a few days, and that's hard for
Uh-huh.
some people. Like for myself, going to the gym is the highlight of my day. I love that, but getting myself out of the gym sometimes for 3 days at a shot, and I don't do this very often. I mean, we're talking, every 4 months or so. But getting out of the gym for 3 days,
Hmm.
it allows me to catch up on a few things, get a little bit of rest, and then when I come back, everything is just clicking to a higher level, even more so than when I take a real deload of a lighter session.
Yeah. No, that makes sense completely. I think it's even probably more, um, I guess, optimal in a contest prep because you get to the point where sometimes you don't really enjoy going to the gym that much. So having time away from the gym itself will probably make you, I guess, fall back in love with it just that little bit more. So when you do go back, your sessions are just that little bit more enjoyable. You're actually wanting to be there, and you can probably get more quality work done. So that's something that I've never really considered. So that's something that I've really learned today. I think that you can structure actual time away from the gym. Because the only time I've really had off is when I've been on holiday, and that's literally it. Um, but like
Yeah,
like 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 you, I'm very similar.
yeah, and I find it really does well. At your age, this probably isn't as much of a concern, but people that have nagging injuries, if the
Okay.
elbow's bothering them or the hip or the knees, just giving that joint a full break can really work some wonders for it. And then
Yeah.
you come back and everything just feels a lot fresher.
Yeah, for sure. Makes sense. Cool. Okay, so the final question I wanted to touch on when it came to just contest prep training, is there any situation where you have seen someone progress or retain strength in a manner that you just think, like, holy shit, like this person should not be maintaining strength like this. And again, like I said at the start with the other question, is there any characteristics that you think you've seen that promote more strength retention throughout a diet?
Yeah, I do have some clients. I'm not going to count bikini competitors in this because bikini competitors don't get as lean as bodybuilders. So therefore, their performance in the gym will usually stay with them a lot longer in the gym or closer to show day.
Yeah.
But generally, I find that people with more quote endomorphic body types are going to retain their strength a lot more efficiently during their contest prep. And I do have some clients. And for those that are unfamiliar, an endomorphic body type or would be somebody that you just look at, they're just big. They're muscular overall, and they're the people that often tend to lose fat, have a hard time losing fat. So I have some clients. So I have fat loss is an absolute grind. And so in some of the most extreme cases, I've had a few female clients where we're down to 30 carbs a day, doing 45 minutes, an hour of cardio daily, and they're telling me I'm hitting PRs over here. and to me, somebody that is not naturally strong, every bit of strength gain I have is just a struggle, and I can't even fathom hitting new personal records when I have only 30 carbs in my system and doing an hour of cardio a day. I also tend to find that my African American clients hold strength better and longer than my white clients. I think some of that has to do with some of the carbohydrate utilization issues that is pretty common in the African American community. That's one of the reasons African Americans tend to have higher rates of diabetes, because they have insulin resistance issues. And so, I'll keep a lower carbohydrate intake for African Americans with a more moderate to higher fat intake and protein. And so I find that they tend to hold strength a little bit better as we get down towards the final weeks. But generally, you can kind of look at somebody and tell. If somebody has real big wrists, real big ankles, and you see their frame looks really big, almost guaranteed that you can take their food really low and get them really lean, and they're still going to be strong as an ox. Whereas someone like me with smaller wrists, smaller ankles, has a naturally just thinner look, they're going to see faster and sooner performance during contest prep.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think there's a lot of things that, again, like I obviously myself, I haven't so much experienced with coaching, because you've coached such a wide diversity of clientele that I perhaps haven't come across yet when it comes to African American clients, etc., and how they differ to other clients. I think that's something very interesting, obviously, that a lot of listeners may well take away, is that that there are a lot of differences when it comes to strength, retention, but the most part, again, is like it's going to be those individuals that do manage stress well, that are sleeping well, that do stay on top of ticking the boxes when it comes to hydration, that nutrient timing around the workouts, and just making sure that that's consistent. So I think that that there's a lot of things that you can control, right, when it comes to a contest prep and retaining your muscle mass and strength. But then again, there's a lot of things that people think are out of their control, and that's probably true as well. It's just about working out how well you can maintain those variables, I guess.
Yeah, and you nailed it too. Like when it comes to the different demographics of people, one thing I really, in my early coaching career, that I wanted to become proficient at was prepping every type of person. And I kind of, for those that aren't familiar with some of my methods, we talked about some of them, but I don't really get locked into any one way of doing things. And one thing I noticed early on in my coaching career is that I would look at different coaches, and if you look at different coaches, most of the time you'll find that their best clients, or their clients that look the best, are like them. The white coaches have, their white clients look really good. Black coaches look really good. Male clients, their males look really good. Female coaches, their female clients look really good. It's because people sometimes automatically assume what works for me is going to work for them, and that's not always the case. And so sometimes, if there are coaches listening, I think sometimes, if you're male, female, white, black, sometimes realize if you're prepping someone of a different gender or race, take not completely, but a slightly altered approach, and realize what holds true for you isn't necessarily going to hold true for this person you're working with.